Hi, everyone. This is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and I'm here today with Nate Lerner and Ryan Knight from Build the Wave. Hi, guys.
Hey, Kelly. How's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
Great. So maybe we can start with the first obvious question, which is, what is Build the Wave?
Well, Build the Wave is a grassroots democratic organization. Our mission is to connect volunteers, activists, and donors with Democrats running in the races that matter most. It's been pretty easy so far to identify the big races. We had, Virginia, Alabama, Pennsylvania, and now Arizona, of course. But, that certainly won't be the case in November. We're going to have a lot of races going on at once, and it's going to be very difficult, I think, for people to know where to allocate their time and their energy and their money and resources. So our mission is to help them make the most effective difference.
Okay, great. So maybe we could then talk a little bit about who the two of you are and what your backgrounds are, how you got to be doing this sort of grassroots work. Nate, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So my background is in political campaigns. I was involved in several electoral campaigns since 2012. And then, I actually was pretty set on getting out of campaigns, a little burnt out for most of 2016. But then lo and behold, Mr. Donald Trump rolls around. He starts coming to power, starts coming to the forefront as well within Republican politics. And that really lit a fire under me and got me back in the race, back in the game. So I co-founded the Democratic Coalition and was a part of that for the majority of the 2016 general election and then in the months after Donald Trump's presidency. But looking ahead till November, I knew I wanted to focus more on the grassroots side. So I worked with Ryan to co-found Build the Wave, and here we are.
Okay. And Ryan, what's your background?
Yeah, so my background is in politics as well. I managed a few campaigns here in Los Angeles, in West Hollywood. And like Nate, when 2016 happened, I realized it was time to organize, and I got very active in the resistance. And I started a Twitter account at Proud Resistor literally the day after the election. And it started with kind of realizing, Trump was using Twitter to kind of spread his messages, and they weren't always true. And so I thought, you know what, we need a platform where we can just start kind of sharing messages and, bringing people that were active in the resistance together. So that's kind of where I started, going from a local level in politics to getting more on a national level. And I just kind of started sharing truth to power, and it started resonating with people, and I started connecting with people all over the country, and that's how I met Nate.
I love these stories of, people talk so much about Twitter being a terrible place, but I've made friends on Twitter that and found, a lot of really great people there. So I really liked hearing those stories about how it can be a force for good as well.
Absolutely. And I think a force for good. And I think that's what we found with Build the Wave is we're able to kind of bring people that want to get involved, say like in the Conor Lamb race in Pennsylvania that we did, but they're in Los Angeles. And because of Twitter and just the way we're all connected, we developed the platform, this texting platform that people can be in Los Angeles and help get out the vote by texting voters in Pennsylvania. So it's just been a really kind of a way to kind of bring it all together, that you can have an impact, in a local race in Pennsylvania from progressives and resistors all over the country.
So was the Conor Lamb election the first one that you did with Build the Wave?
Yeah, that was our big trial one. It was, a good opportunity for us to experiment, but also really kind of unleash our texting platform. And the response that we saw was really just beyond what we had anticipated. And we were actually scrambling to, make sure we had the capacity and the ability to keep up with demand. But as a result, we sent over 90,000 texts, and we ran really effective Facebook ads that saw a lot of engagement, both nationally and locally within the district. And yeah, it was just a really good platform for us to experiment with our approaches and kind of build the infrastructure we needed for November. It seemed to work out pretty well. So we've been happy with the results.
And so you said you sent 90,000 texts. That's amazing for the Conor Lamb election. So how many people were involved in that effort, sending those texts?
So we had over, 240 volunteers?
Yeah, that's the number of people who actually were active as far as sending texts. So we had a lot of folks who signed up and were interested, but just didn't have the time. But they were really eager to let us know that, hey, we want to do this again, or do this at some point, keep us in the loop. So it's really exciting to see all the enthusiasm out there.
Yeah, and what's also interesting too is it's amazing how quickly the technology has changed. So when I managed, I was pretty active in local politics, in 2013 and 2014, we weren't doing any text banking. We were still doing phone banking. And, now everyone's on their smartphones and people would prefer to get a text. So it's just interesting to see how technology has really shifted the way things are going to be done now, with this kind of thing. And the response has been amazing.
Yeah, I just earlier today got a text from someone in Moms Demand Action inviting me to a local meeting, and I would not have responded to a phone call. I probably wouldn't have answered the phone, but the text came and I said, oh, exactly. Yeah, I can come to this meeting.
Exactly. Yeah. So and that's what we're finding good success with. And it's a good tool. In the Lamb race, I think he won by 600 votes. So if you think about that, I mean, when we were able to hit 90,000 Democratic voters in Pennsylvania a few days leading up to the election, and we hit voters on election day, I mean, that can really have an impact when an election is decided by only 600 votes. So, we feel really strongly about kind of the impact it can have, especially in these closer races that we want to swing and flip blue.
So how does the tool actually work? Are people sending texts from their phones or from a website?
Yeah, this is something we want to express to people that it's, A, it's free, and then B, it's not from your actual number. So I'm really glad you asked. We've had a lot of people express concern about that. But it's really cool. Yeah, it's through this website called Ground Game. And the guys who made it were the ones who ran the texting program for the Clinton campaign. And then afterwards, they founded this texting platform, and you can access it through a browser. So you can use your phone, you can use a computer, and we prepay for all the texts, and it's sent through a local number. And then you can see the responses coming in and reply back to people. And so it's really easy to use. And we've had a lot of folks who aren't, necessarily very tech savvy be very successful with it and send hundreds of texts. So it's been really fantastic.
Yeah. So the text actually isn't sent from your phone. It's sent through our platform that we set up on our website through Ground Game.
And so if you text a voter and then they text back and they have a question about, I don't know where my polling place is, or I don't know who Conor Lamb is, what are the sorts of responses that people give then?
So what's cool is we actually, part of the platform, it comes with these canned responses that we can pre-write for volunteers. So they can go in and the voter says, oh, how do I find my polling place? There'll be a canned response prepared at the polling location. They can just click on it. And they can edit that accordingly, or if they know, they can do it on their own. But we actually, where we had the most success of the Lamb race was definitely on election day, people saying, oh, can you tell me where my polling location is? And then the volunteer would either send them the link to look that up, or they would ask their address and they would look it up for them. And we had several anecdotal stories that, folks were saying, wow, this is so great. I got to help, a handful of people find their polling locations. And in a race as tight as we saw in Pennsylvania, that can make all the difference when you're getting a few extra votes out.
And so the other cool project that you guys did just recently was texting unregistered voters. So can you talk a little bit about what that was?
Yeah, definitely. So we worked with our data firm that provided the cell numbers for the Conor Lamb race. And we asked them, what can you also provide unregistered numbers? And they were like, absolutely. And we knew that there was all this energy coming off of the March for Our Lives event. And, that we really wanted to keep that momentum going and then build on it. So we did this huge texting campaign where instead of texting voters, we were texting non-voters who weren't registered. And we targeted the states where online registration was available, which was actually far more than I realized. It was 38 of them. And after that, it was so successful and people were still interested in texting more that we did it in the remaining states. And we just texted them a link to print out a form to mail in. And we got to follow up with them to make sure they do. And that's what's cool too, is we can follow up with them, with everyone in a few weeks to see if they registered.
And what did we hit? I think in 4 days we hit over, was it 65,000?
Yeah, 75. We actually, the interest was so much greater than we anticipated. And we literally just blew through the list. And the data firm didn't have any more folks for us to text between the age of 18 and 30 who were unregistered, because obviously that data is not always readily available as much as voter data is. And it was just, it was crazy. We wish we had more people to text.
And with that age, with Generation Z and millennials, they do everything on their smartphones. So it's the perfect audience for it. They can get, it's one of the 37 states that has online registration. They can get a text from one of our volunteers and, they can go and register right then and there on their smartphone.
The one time I had high schoolers on the podcast, they did all of the arranging of the podcast over text. And I was like, what is this world? So,
right?
Yes.
Pretty soon people won't be talking anymore.
So what kind of responses did your volunteers report? That people seemed happy to get these texts, that they were having some success in getting people to register? Could you tell, what sort of response they were getting?
For the most part, the response has been very positive. There's always a few stories that, that someone doesn't want to get a message on their phone. But for the most part, the response has been amazing. And Nate, you had that amazing story too about the person who couldn't. We provided them information about being able to register if you had committed a felony or something like that. Wasn't there a story about that, Nate?
Yeah, it was really crazy. The volunteers sent us a screenshot of their text, and it was this man who said, "Oh, I'm not able to vote. I'm a convicted felon." And luckily, the volunteer, did a quick Google search and said, "Oh, well, in Iowa, which is where the voter was, convicted felons can appeal that loss of their voting right." And luckily, this man knew about it already, and he said he was in the process. But it really kind of was an eye-opener because it indicated the power of this, that, we can communicate with these folks on the ground and get them information that they may not otherwise know. Because, I'm someone who's been involved in politics pretty readily, pretty often, and I wasn't even really familiar with this voting rights appeal. So it was pretty fascinating to see that, and I think really speaks to the power of what we're doing, not just now, but also long-term, the potential this kind of work has. And
I'd echo that. I'd also add one more thing about one of the things I've heard a lot of feedback from is our actual volunteers. Is everybody wants to participate, especially with all the energy that Trump has brought and, just in getting involved. And this is a way for a lot of people to get involved in a way that they weren't before. It's not just sending a tweet. You're actually reaching out to a voter, to encourage them to get to the poll and vote, or you're reaching out to an unregistered voter to encourage them to register to vote. So we're seeing just a lot of excitement from, the volunteers that we've brought into this. And that's the most rewarding thing for me, is seeing that engagement, because that is what it's going to take in November. It's going to take every single one of us, and it's going to take that level of engagement to continue to move forward and to move the progressive agenda forward and to make the splash in November that we're all hoping for. And that's actually why we called it Build the Wave, because we saw a lot of people just writing blue wave, like it's just going to happen. And it's not going to happen unless we build it, right? Like we actually have to do it. It's not just, we kind of live in this new generation where it's like, people will tweet something and that's great, but we have to get engaged and we have to actually build the wave if we want there to be a blue wave. So that's been a cool part of the journey, just to see the level of excitement get more and more.
And so then the next upcoming project, which as you're listening to this is probably Friday night, so it's going to start the next day, is with a previous guest from this podcast, Dr. Hiral Tipirneni. So what are you doing for her campaign?
Oh, we're replicating the same model that we had from the Lamb campaign. What's great is we've learned from all our mistakes. Then, not that we made too many, but it was a new platform for us, and it was a new experience to do this texting on such a large scale and with so many remote volunteers. And we're really taking everything we learned from that and all that we built and the infrastructure that we built up and putting it in place again. And our goal is to really match what we did with the Lamb race, except we have a little less time. We're only doing it during the final 4 days, but our goal is to send 80,000 texts to 40,000 voters there. And we already have, folks who've chipped in anywhere from $5 to $100 to help us cover the cost of those texts. So, thank you to everyone who donated and made this possible. And we also have our whole volunteer army lined up to start texting already. And I'm sure there'll be new folks signing up once we start promoting it as well. So it's going to be really great to just kind of take that and do it all over again and just keep building for November.
Yep. And that launches a Saturday morning. We will be texting all weekend to get out the vote in Arizona.
Great. I'm going to ignore my children this weekend and just text the vote.